Magnitude 7. 4. The tsunami warning that reached 9 countries in minutes. At 48 minutes past 8 on a Friday morning, the seafloor off the coast of southern Mexico moved. In a matter of seconds, a magnitude 7.4 earthquake tore through the state of Chiapas, and within minutes, a tsunami warning was racing out across the Pacific. Not to one country, not to 2, to 9. And for a few tense hours, tens of millions of people spread along thousands of kilometers of coastline were left holding the same terrible question. How big is the wave? And how much time do we have left? This is the story of what happened on July 17th, 2026, the quake, the warning, the 80 aftershocks that came behind it, and the reason this exact stretch of coastline haunts the scientists who study it more than almost anywhere else on Earth. And it is the story of just how close this came to being something far, far worse. Let us begin with the moment itself. According to the United States Geological Survey, the earthquake struck at 8:48 in the morning local time. Its first measured magnitude was 7.4, later revised slightly downward to 7.3. Either way, this was a major, dangerous earthquake, the kind capable of leveling buildings and killing thousands under the wrong conditions. The epicenter sat roughly 135 kilometers to the southwest of Ciudad Hidalgo, a Mexican city right on the border with Guatemala. And there was one detail that made it especially dangerous. It was shallow. The rupture happened just 10 kilometers below the surface. Shallow earthquakes do not lose their energy on the long journey up through the crust, which means they shake the ground far harder than deeper ones. This one was felt across 3 separate countries within moments of the rupture. But the earthquake itself was only the first alarm. The second alarm was the ocean. Because this quake happened offshore, beneath the seabed, it carried the one ingredient that turns an earthquake into a mass casualty event: the potential to move water. The United States Tsunami Warning System and the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center did not wait to find out. Within minutes, they issued a tsunami warning for every coast within 300 kilometers of the epicenter. Along parts of the Mexican and Guatemalan coastline, waves of 1 to 3 feet were flagged as possible. And the alert did not stop at the border. Wave advisories of up to a foot were issued down the entire Pacific rim of Central and South America: Colombia, Costa Rica, Ecuador, El Salvador, Honduras, Nicaragua, Panama, and Peru. Add it together. That is 9 countries, thousands of kilometers of populated coastline, tens of millions of people, all told to watch the sea at the same moment, all because a single fault had slipped beneath the water off the coast of Mexico. In coastal towns, the sirens and the phone alerts did their job. People stopped what they were doing. They looked toward the water, and they waited. On the ground in Chiapas, the shaking had been violent. In the border city of Tapachula, the panic was immediate. One person was so terrified that they leapt from a third-floor window to escape the building. Another was struck by a door that was torn off its frame by the force of the tremor. Videos began flooding onto social media almost instantly, showing lampposts whipping back and forth, water sloshing out of rooftop tanks, and dust rising off cracked walls. The USGS warned that at least moderate damage was likely along the southwest coast of Chiapas, and across the state, buildings began showing fresh structural cracks. And then, before the dust had even had time to settle, the ground refused to go quiet. By the middle of the day, seismographs had recorded around 80 aftershocks rippling outward from the epicenter. 80 separate jolts in a matter of hours. And the largest of them was itself a magnitude 6.5. A powerful earthquake in its own right, one that, on any ordinary day, would have been the headline all by itself. For the people of Chiapas, this was the most frightening part. Every aftershock carried the same silent threat. Any one of them could bring down a building already weakened by the main quake. And any one of them, if it happened in the wrong place beneath the sea, could send a fresh pulse of energy toward the coast. Across the border, the tremors rolled into Guatemala and El Salvador. Buildings were evacuated. People poured out into the streets and open squares, afraid to go back inside. But here is the part that matters, and the part the clickbait channels always leave out. In both of those countries, no casualties and no significant damage were reported. The fear was enormous. The physical toll was not, which brings us to the question that every one of those 9 countries was really asking. Where was the wave? For hours, the tsunami warning stood, and then Mexico's Naval Tsunami Warning Center did the one thing that only works when the science is done carefully and calmly. Instead of guessing, they read the ocean directly. They analyzed the real-time sea level data streaming in from coastal gauges, watching for the telltale rise and fall that signals a tsunami moving through the water. And what the data told them was that no significant variations were expected. The wall of water that 9 countries had braced for was not coming. The warning was canceled. To understand why that warning could be stood down, it helps to understand how a tsunami is actually born. A tsunami is not created by the shaking. It is created when the seafloor itself suddenly lifts or drops, shoving the entire column of water above it upward or downward, like a hand pushing up through the surface of a bath. The more vertical that motion, and the shallower and larger the rupture, the bigger the wave that races outward. But when a fault moves mostly sideways rather than up and down, or ruptures in the wrong orientation, far less water is displaced, and any resulting wave stays small. That, combined with the live readings from the gauges, is what allowed Mexico's scientists to look at a magnitude 7.4 earthquake and conclude correctly that the sea was not going to rise up to meet the land. That reading did not come out of nowhere. Scattered across the Pacific is a network built for exactly this moment. Tide gauges bolted to the coastline and deep ocean sensors anchored to the seafloor that can feel the faint pressure change of a tsunami passing overhead and relay it up to a buoy on the surface within seconds. It is this quiet, mostly invisible web of instruments that turns a terrifying magnitude 7.4 into something that can be measured, judged, and safely canceled in the space of a single morning. Without it, every coastal town in 9 countries would have been left to guess. Mexico's president, Claudia Sheinbaum, spoke to the country to confirm it. Her words were these: after the 7.4 magnitude earthquake southwest of Huixla and the ones recorded in Ciudad Hidalgo, she said she had spoken with the governors of the states of Chiapas and Tabasco, and those states were reporting no damage so far. When the final count came in, this enormous 9-country event had left 2 people injured in Tapachula and some cracked walls. No deaths. So how does a magnitude 7.4 earthquake, powerful enough to trigger a tsunami alert across 9 nations, end with 2 injuries? And the answer is part luck and part geography. And that geography is the single most important thing to understand about this coastline, because it is also the reason this region cannot ever afford to relax. This stretch of southern Mexico sits directly on top of the Middle America Trench. Here, a giant slab of the planet's crust called the Cocos Plate is diving downward, grinding beneath the North American and Caribbean plates a few centimeters every single year. It is one of the most seismically active subduction zones anywhere on Earth. That relentless grinding is exactly what produced Friday's earthquake. But the same zone is capable of producing something far larger and far deadlier, the kind of megathrust rupture that lifts the entire seafloor and shoves a genuine city-drowning tsunami toward the shore. On this Friday, the fault released its energy in a way and at a depth that spared the coast the worst. There is no guarantee the next one will, and we do not have to imagine what the next one could look like, because history has already shown this exact region twice. In September of 1985, a magnitude 8.0 earthquake struck off Mexico's Pacific coast and sent its energy racing inland to Mexico City. More than 9,000 people were killed, entire apartment blocks pancaked to the ground, and the disaster reshaped how the entire country thinks about earthquakes. Then, in September of 2017, an even larger quake, magnitude 8.2, ruptured almost this very stretch of the Chiapas coast. It was the most powerful earthquake to strike Mexico in over a century. It killed close to 100 people, and it did generate a tsunami. Same trench, same plates, same coastline. That is the shadow hanging over every warning issued here, and it is why no one on this coast is ever allowed to simply wait and see. That is the reason the tsunami warning went out to 9 countries within minutes of the shaking on Friday. When a fault like this one moves beneath the sea, the people living on the coast may have only minutes before a wave arrives, and there is no time to debate. The warning that was canceled on Friday was not an overreaction, and it was not a false alarm in the way people sometimes complain about. It was the entire system working exactly as it was designed to work. Treat every major offshore earthquake as a potential catastrophe. Get the alert out in minutes, and then, and only then, read the ocean, and stand it down if the water proves it safe. Those few minutes between the seafloor moving and a warning reaching a phone in someone's hand are, quite literally, the difference between life and death on a coastline like this one. If you want the real story behind events like this, the actual magnitudes, the real warnings, the real science, without the invented death tolls and fake footage you see on so many other channels, then subscribe, and you will be right here for the next one. Because along the Middle America Trench, the plates have not stopped moving tonight. Chiapas is still counting its aftershocks. Somewhere beneath that same patch of ocean, the pressure is already building again toward the next rupture. And the only thing standing between the next magnitude 7 or the next magnitude 8 and the millions of people who live within reach of the water is the handful of minutes it takes for a warning to travel from the bottom of the sea to the palm of a hand.